Hey y'all, it's Mary Hyatt, and I'm so excited you're here for this month's topic, which is all about emotional intelligence. Y'all, we are emotional beings, and yet most of us have no idea how to talk about our emotions, feel them, or process them. But don't worry, we have a whole month to make you an emotional genius to improve your relationships and your life. So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Living Fully Alive podcast with Mary Hyatt, here to help you find your authentic voice, learn how to love yourself, and embrace your life. And now, your host, life and mindset coach, body love advocate, and doTERRA Presidential Diamond, Mary Hyatt.
Hey y'all, real quick before we hop into today's episode, I am so excited to share a new resource with you that I'm so passionate about. I have created an anxiety recovery kit for you. It's all for free. I'm going to give you 3 separate audio guided meditations specifically around stress and anxiety. And I even have one for panic attacks, plus a specific breathing technique proven to help you lower your cortisol levels and calm your stress and anxiety, plus my favorite essential oil recipes for supporting anxious feelings. So follow the link below or head over to maryhyatt.com/recovery kit, RECOVERYKIT, to snag your anxiety kit as a personal gift from yours truly. All right, now here's this week's episode. Hey everybody, it is Mary, and I am finally sitting across from Lindsley Brooks.
Hey, reunited, and it feels so good.
Oh my gosh, is that a song?
Yeah, reunited. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow, get it, girl. We have not done a podcast together since the beginning of December, so this feels really exciting to finally get to do one, to have my co-host back with me, and honestly, talking about emotions, which I think that you and I talk about emotions
all the time
because we are emotional beings. So last week I talked about the anatomy of emotions. This block that we have sometimes to feeling is the fact that it's sort of this esoteric, elusive idea of feeling your feelings. And scientifically, biologically, we don't really know what that means. Like, how do we feel? So I got into all of the details about that in the last episode, which I love that you guys have been messaging me about it and saying that it has been blowing your mind, because I think it is a very, it's just a concept that you don't hear a lot about unless you're in the industry or you're a therapist or something like that. You're not usually thinking about the chemistry of emotions and what it's signaling into the body and how that's producing an emotional experience. And unless you're a scientist, you're not thinking about that. So I'm glad that I sort of was able to bring it down to layman terms, because I think that it removes the barrier of it feeling out there without language. Like, we could bring it in and put some feet to it and some weight to this idea. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into this, because I think on one hand, having new knowledge about how our brains are working and what is happening as we are rehearsing these old past memories of emotions. But now, what are some of the societal blocks that we have towards feeling? These cultural norms that are showing up in a weirdly weird freaking time with social media and all of that. Like, there's a lot that goes on, I think, that is whispering to us in more ways than one how to not feel, how to be really good at pretending that we are happy all of the time. Y'all, can I get a raise of hands if you are exhausted by social media?
Yeah.
I mean, I know we probably mentioned this at least every month at some point about just this like weird curation that's happening on social media, where the pressure to make your life look perfect and to make yourself look happy all the time. And it is causing a lot of anxiety and depression.
Well, and have you even noticed too, especially in this positive, spiritual movement I see this happen all the time, like the affirmations on Instagram, of course, but just even the spiritual teachings. It's like you're supposed to feel good all the time. And if you're
Yes.
having a negative emotion, then you're not in alignment, or you're not positively creating your life in a way. And then you're going to, shoot yourself in the foot and create more negative emotion. We've heard all
Yes.
of that. So it's constantly being reinforced that if you have any negative emotions, which, hello, newsflash, we're human beings,
Yep.
then you're doing something wrong and it needs to be fixed. And you need to shift your vibration or shift your energy, whatever.
Yeah. It is a scary time when you are developing as a evolved human, and we're like, you and I do this work all the time. We're constantly reading things or listening to podcasts or doing the work and retreats to elevate, to kind of ride the wave of a vibration that is higher than something that is mundane or depressed or something that's in a lower vibration. I mean, like, who doesn't want to feel happier
Right.
more of the time?
Right.
But I think that there is this weird pressure to get it right.
Yeah.
And to make sure that you aren't feeling bad. And the shame on feeling those feelings, like, I think that's, I've been in this process where it feels like if I'm feeling something quote unquote negative, like anxiety or depression or fear or doubt, the first thing that comes into my head is I shouldn't feel this way. I know better. I know better. I know how to change my vibration. I know how to shift my thinking. I know how to get in a different state. And I really do. But it negates the importance of the quote unquote negative emotions. Those emotions can be our roadmap and can be very helpful in our process. Like, they are just as important in our human development and involvement as more quote unquote positive emotions. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, we seriously, this idea that we are just supposed to feel good goes against the whole premise of us just being human beings. We were built with all of these like emotional range, and it only makes sense that if there's grief, there's important to feel the grief. If there's sadness, and that's, I know you'll get into this later on, but it really is helpful to know that you're supposed to feel these things. You don't want us to get stuck there.
Right.
And yet, if you're not acknowledging these real emotions, then they will come out sideways. It could, you know what I'm saying? It's like, if you don't give yourself the chance to actually experience sadness or grief or why am I angry, and being curious around these emotions, it will come back and like get in your face and come out sideways with road rage or God only knows what.
Yeah, outburst of anger or whatever. Yeah, totally. And I think that what we're seeing is, whereas before, I think growing up, there was a lot of messaging and programming. I think especially, well, actually, I was going to say especially for women and little girls, but I think equally so for little boys.
Yeah.
To not be too emotional.
Right.
To not feel, to suck it up, or for the case of boys, man up. And there was a lot of conversation. Children should be seen and not heard. If you have a temper tantrum or if you have some kind of an emotional response, a breakdown, go to your room, handle it. We don't want to see that. Oh, you're just being emotional, little girl. There's a lot of judgments towards feeling emotion. So I think we had a lot of that going on as children. There wasn't a whole lot of education and space for the emotional experience that you have as a child when you aren't able to self-regulate in the way that you can as an adult, or you don't have the filtering system or the cognitive behavioral skills that you would as an adult to process what's happening. I mean, it is so visceral when you're little. And when you have a meltdown, when you have a temper tantrum, like, those are really normal and natural responses for children to experience and have. But the shame, that was given to most children, like, I think about that old saying, children should be seen and not heard.
Well, isn't it interesting too? We never valued emotions like we do with intellect.
Right.
And so everything has been about like, suppressing this part of ourselves that we've deemed is like our weakness.
I was going to say it's like a weaker skill. Yeah.
And so then since we're small, we're taught and you need to handle things logically and not emotionally.
Yeah. And in private.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you think about some of the judgments towards women in the workplace. Oh, they're too emotional to handle what happens in the workplace.
Yeah.
What happens when they get their period and they get all, PMSy, we don't want them in the boardroom.
Right.
It's like the judgment of seeing an emotion as weakness, as something that is going to interfere with decision making. I mean, let's be honest, it's a lot of times the most powerful superpower that we have
is vulnerability and emotions.
Yeah.
I know. That's why I get so excited to think, like, I do feel like we are in a time and space as a collective where the fact that we're even having this conversation right now says that something is shifting, because you think about, Brene Brown to me is always the perfect example of like how teaching our collective conscious about vulnerability and the power of vulnerability. And even when you see tragedies like the Kobe Bryant stuff happen in these strong, powerful men getting on camera, breaking down, crying, and like letting themselves have their emotion of grief from the loss of their buddy. It's like, so isn't it interesting? It's like, I do feel like there's something that tells us emotions have more value and that they are just as important, if not maybe more, than dealing with things from a very compartmentalized or intellectual or logical sort of way.
Yes. And I think that some of that old thinking is still carried over.
Totally.
So like, for example, if somebody asks you, how are you feeling?
Oh,
hey, good to see you.
How you doing?
How you doing? Fine.
I'm
good.
Fine.
I mean, literally it is relegated to two words, fine or good.
Yeah.
Or if you maybe you're feeling something different, you're going to say great. Oh, yeah, I'm doing great. But there's never an explanation about it.
No.
It's not actually a question that people are wanting an answer for. Mm-hmm. It's a societal nicety that we have. And then you think about, there's still this desire to downplay our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Like when even just we were having a conversation just before we got on to do this episode, and I was talking about some of my emotional stuff that I've been processing and dealing with recently as going through neurofeedback and bringing up some old trauma and processing that and feeling all the anxiety. And one of the judgments that I caught myself saying at the time was, yeah, but everybody is dealing with the same thing. Or another thought could be something like, well, they've got it harder than I do. Or what do I have to complain about? And we dismiss oftentimes our emotional experience because it's not as bad as somebody else. Mm-hmm. It's not as tragic as something else. It's not as traumatic as somebody else's trauma. And we have been kind of taught to squelch the intensity of it or even admit to the extent that we're feeling something. And I think we'll just be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I'm just going to kind of write it off. Or we want to hurry up and get through the process. Like, I don't have the luxury to sit here and feel this for a long time. Like, I got work to get to. I've got kids to get to. I've got life to get to. Like, I'll handle it. Mm-hmm. And so there still is this patterning, the old programming of downplaying it and dismissing it really, and just being like, it's not that big of a deal. And it makes me sad thinking about that, because I think for as much as we have had these conversations around vulnerability or authenticity, thank you, Brene, we're still stuck in some of this old stuff of just, being seen and not heard kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. And it is interesting because it's like, how do you, especially in this day and age too, but with all this conversation about feeling our feelings, it's like, how do we really honor these emotions while not getting stuck in them? Like that's what's so, I think it's kind of hard for me. And I also have this fear of like being too emotional.
Oh God. Yeah.
Or totally. Too much, and
I don't know. For me, it's like, I have a limit on how much I will quote unquote tax someone by my emotions. And it's like, there's this shut off point where I have asked for too much and I'll stop myself. Like, it's like, I have this internal barometer that says like, okay, that's enough. You have like
You've hit your limit.
Yeah, you've hit your limit. But in the codependency and caretaking of somebody else's ability to handle you, it's like, I do this with Bentley. It's like I'll be experiencing something and I'll tell him about it and I'm feeling the emotions of it and maybe I'll start crying and he'll hold me and then I'll go, oh, that's too much. I'm too emotional. There's going to be a point where he's going to say, you're being a burden. This is, I know, part of my past and part of my old programming from previous relationships where there felt like there really was a limit. And now there's not, but I'll stop myself. Even with friends. It's like, I don't want to come across as needy.
Overburden you. Yeah.
Overburden.
Well, it's because on some level, we're just projecting that our emotions are too much for us.
Right.
So surely they'd be too much for somebody else, right?
Yeah. And I think in the verbal processing of it, sometimes we're working it out in real time.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what's coming after or how long it's going to take or what the outcome is going to be. And that is a very vulnerable thing to walk with somebody through when you're unsure yourself and you're, it's like feeling 50 different things at the same time or having 500 different conversations in your head at the same time. You're just trying to make sense of it all anyways. And then to bring somebody along the journey, we censor. There's a lot of emotional censoring going on, I think.
Which, some of that is kind of healthy that you're able, at least for me, I know because I am a 7, right? Like, and we know for those of you to be reminded the Enneagram 7 is the enthusiast and they avoid feeling negative emotions as much as possible. I've done a lot of work where like I'm able to go into my negative emotions and almost like sit in them. So I don't know if I'm maybe not the typical 7, but the point is that there's something about like I get so afraid that I'm going to overburden people with my emotions that I prefer to kind of go home. I can almost like feel it welling in me. And then it's like a dog that's going off into the corner to like go be alone to die. I just need to get home, get away from everybody and just let it come. And I can almost like feel it when it's about to happen. And it's just that place of like, I can hold the space for my emotions now and knowing that they'll pass. They don't normally, when you're in the moment, sometimes you forget that they'll pass.
Right.
But the work you and I have been doing the last couple of years, it's like I can tell myself it's okay to feel these things and you will survive and it will move out. But man, if you don't have the emotional intellect, or the emotional experiences of these things, you literally try to avoid it because it feels like a tidal wave. And there are moments that you and I have reached out to each other. I'm like, I'm just so in it right now. I'm so disoriented in my emotional tidal wave feeling.
Totally.
I can't sort through even what I'm feeling. I'm just so in it. And so just even being able to articulate that.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Sometimes that's enough because you can just go, I remember what this felt like. I've been here before. I don't have to identify it with my words. I can just allow myself to sit in this knowing it'll pass.
Totally. Well, it's like we joke as friends, we say, send us the emoji of the white flag.
Yes. Yeah.
I had to do that to you the other day, actually, because I said we were scheduled to do this podcast and I went to an EMDR session with my therapist and went through all this old trauma. And I was so spent and so exhausted. I had to text you and say, I'm raising the white flag. Can we reschedule? I need to go home and cocoon and take care of myself. But I think there is a certain level of confidence that you and I have that we know, even when it's really dark and even when it's really bad, we have the skill to emotionally regulate, that we can self-regulate. And that has been created and developed over time of first giving ourselves permission to feel. Because I think that the first piece of this, like handling your emotions in a healthy way, the first piece is being willing to be honest with how you feel, being willing to give yourself permission. Like one of the most powerful questions that I ask in my group coaching for people in the workbook section is I'll say, finish the following sentence. If I gave myself permission to admit it, I feel angry that. If I gave myself permission to admit that I feel sad that. If I gave myself permission to admit it, I feel really hurt by. And I have a list of these questions, but the phrasing is so important. If I gave myself permission to admit it, I feel. And that alone, that's something that anybody listening can do for themselves, is to start writing that out, journaling that out, because we have to get honest with ourselves first and foremost, how we feel. And that requires that we check in with our emotional state. We have to pause to ask ourselves, I do this in all my guided meditations, what is the highest emotion that I'm feeling right now? What am I feeling? Like pausing to just like tap in and say, what am I feeling? It starts there. It starts with giving ourselves permission to feel what is truly here without trying to avoid, numb, cope, deny,
judge it.
Yeah. Criticize it, but sort of creating that space to allow. And I think this, I want to play a little game with you for a second.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you I was going to do this. So this is
watch out.
Hey y'all, I just wanted to interrupt this episode real quick to remind you to subscribe to this podcast. I know that emails get lost in your spam folder, so subscribing means my episodes come right to your phone. So go ahead, hit that quick little subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any of the Living Fully Alive episodes. Plus, in addition to subscribing to the podcast, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. I don't know if you know this, but I have been releasing guided meditations every Monday over on YouTube, and you're not going to hear them here. So if you've been wanting to start an easy meditation practice, subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you don't miss out on my short 15-minute guided meditations. All right, now back to this week's episode. It's a little game because I think this is going to help with thinking about this. And this is the game of emotional vocabulary.
Okay.
So because I think one of the issues, before the game real quick, I think one of the issues is that people don't know how to express what they're feeling because they have a limited choice of words for it. So for example, usually people have words like sad, angry, lonely. Chime in if you think of any things that are like real basic.
Yeah, like happy, sad, afraid. What's the 4 basic ones? Happy, sad, afraid, and mad? Or happy, sad. Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah.
I was thinking like angry, something like that. So, right. So we have a very, very limited idea of expressing our emotions. And as we know, even though we might not be able to say it in our words, there are so many nuanced feelings that we experience. And so if you say something like, well, I'm just feeling really sad. God, I mean, that could really mean that you could be feeling lonely. You could be experiencing some form of grief. I mean, there's so many types of reasons of sadness or why you'd be sad or nuances to that. And so I want to see how your emotional vocabulary is, Lindsley.
And I know, I love this. I will say real fast, when I'm in that tidal wave of overwhelm with my emotions, I often pull out those 4 main ones just to try to help me get into a category. Do you know what I mean?
That's good. Yeah. Totally.
Just because like if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I don't know what's wrong. I'm like, okay, am I feeling mad, sad, angry, or afraid?
Totally. So what we're going to do is you're going to list off 3 emotions that fit into the category of something that is a high vibration, that is more negative, but using your emotional vocabulary to choose words that are not like the basic ones we just
like
mentioned.
Anger. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So the first one is negative, high vibration. If you could list 3 emotions that would fit in that category.
Yes. Agitated, terrified, frustrated,
That's good.
irritable.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
That's great. So
I'm very emotionally intelligent.
You are. Way to go. You get a gold star. But so I'm going to list off a few more.
Okay.
So enraged, livid,
ooh,
apprehensive, repulsed, restless, stunned, shocked, jittery, frightened, concerned, uneasy, peeved. Okay, so these are just some of these that you think about when you describe how you feel. You can open up and learn some new vocabulary words.
And every single one of those have a different energy around it that actually get down to the root. It's like, oh my gosh, why am I more peeved than I am irritated? Or, like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So second category.
Okay.
Negative emotion, low vibration.
Okay.
So think of like sadness, something like that would
Okay.
be a low vibration, but quote unquote negative.
Okay. Like depressed or apathetic or despair, hopelessness.
Yes.
I want almost like the numb.
Yep. She's an overachiever, guys.
Oh, I'm still going. I can stop now.
No, it's so good. So, I mean, obviously you have a larger vocabulary, I would say, than most people. Alienated, despondent, isolated, hopeless, glum, disgusted, disappointed, discouraged, disheartened, exhausted, fatigued, tired. Think about the nuances of those. Sullen, desolate, spent, drained. Okay, so these are great. All right, so the next category for you is high energy in a positive emotion. High energy, high vibration for a positive emotion. So something like a synonym of happy.
Okay. Elated, thrilled, ecstatic, vivacious, vibrant, golden.
Yes, I love
this. Electrifying.
Ooh.
I don't know. I'm electrified. No, I don't.
I love it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can go to blissful, joyful, energized, cheerful, inspired, festive, surprised, lively. I mean, you named some great ones also. Okay, last category is positive, low vibration. Positive, low vibration. So synonym to something like peaceful or calm.
Okay. Ooh, this one's harder. Excited. Actually, that word gets used a lot. Let's see.
So lower vibration.
Low vibration.
Like think about like calm, relaxed.
Oh, like like all the spa words.
Exactly. This is a spa category.
Yeah. Relaxed, peaceful, comfort. I don't know.
Yeah, content, balanced, comfortable, cozy, serene, complacent, tranquil, easygoing, at ease, satisfied, mellow.
These are all the words that we see on Instagram all the time and all the positive life coaching words that are out there.
I love it. Well, I just think this just shows that like there are so many types of feelings, and when we feel constricted in our vocabulary, it's challenging to feel validated when it's like, I can't express what I'm feeling. And so as we grow in this kind of emotional intelligence, one of the pieces of the puzzle is to begin to expand our vocabulary. And I think typically if you're working with a therapist, at some point she's going to hand you a sheet with all the different emotions.
Put it on your refrigerator, your bathroom mirror, or whatever.
And just practice when somebody says, how are you doing? Hey, how are you doing? See if you can pull out another word besides good or fine or great that would actually more accurately describe how you're feeling. Because again, what that does is it gives you a moment to check in and pause to really see, how am I feeling? How am I doing? And then to practice using this word, and we're expanding the emotional experience just by having new verbiage for it.
And you know what else too? As you're saying that, I'm realizing that's really the difference between somebody who is overly emotional and someone who has healthy emotional like intelligence or whatever. It's like the emotional person really doesn't know why they're feeling mad. They haven't done the curiosity or the kind of the how, just diving deeper into it. But when you go into this level of like, okay, I'm going to go explore why I'm feeling this. I'm going to sit with this and maybe even go through my list. It does start to open things up, doesn't it? And that's really the difference.
Well, in this, we're going to get into the how to process emotions in the 4th episode of this month. So I'm going to actually walk everybody through exactly how to feel. Like, what does it look like to feel your feelings? What does it look like to then process them in a healthy way? So we'll get into that. But this does sort of bring up the idea of how do we feel our emotions in a healthy way? Because I think there is a constructive way of feeling our emotions and there's a destructive way of feeling.
Indulgent way.
Indulgent way. Yeah, where there's not really a focus on moving through them to a space of more enlightenment, more awareness, and then healthfully, is that a word? Process them. But it's more like the intensity of the emotion. So what would you say is the difference between somebody who is feeling an indulgent feeling, kind of entering into the drama of it? You know, you think about Real Housewives, for example, flipping over the table.
Oh God,
or
right.
These crazy outbursts of emotions, or Bachelor or whatever. I don't watch those anymore, but
Yeah.
Those are like the epitome of people who are feeling but not doing it in a constructive way.
Yeah.
So those would be like the indulgent feelings versus somebody who has cultivated the ability to be self-aware, to self-regulate, and to manage their feelings.
I mean, yeah, I think you nailed it. It's like the difference is that you don't give in to every emotional whim, and you are curious. You actually notice that, and like, let's use these examples of these Desperate Housewives shows. It's like knowing that rage outburst was really like having some curiosity about it and having that pause before, so that you're not just giving into it. Like there's that, like, managing your own emotions, managing other people's emotions when they're lashing out at you, that you're curious around, hey, they just freaked out. Maybe there's something else going on for them.
Right.
Or like wonder where that came from, or wonder what's going on for them in their day to day. Even asking these curious questions, to me, that's healthy emotional intelligence, right?
Right.
And then also with ourselves, really sitting with this idea of like, why did I just freak out on that guy on the interstate and want to just go like throw him the bird with road rage, right?
Totally.
Like giving space for your own curiosity about what's going on with your emotions, that is so much healthier than just being like indulging it and letting yourself just feel just because you're feeling.
Right. And it's maturity versus immaturity, really.
Totally.
Because I think one of the questions that I love to teach people to ask when they're beginning to feel their emotions, like let's say you've given yourself permission to feel, you're starting to open up to that a little bit more. Well, then you can, like you said, get curious and ask yourself, how interesting.
Yeah.
How interesting. I wonder why I just had that urge or impulse or emotion that seemed like it came out of nowhere. Because like I talked about last week, just we're getting triggered all the time that is producing these chemical responses within our body. And so it's pausing to go, whoa, that was a really strong reaction that I just had. And I feel so defensive, or I just feel this rush of anger, or that made me instantly want to cry. Instead of just, first just going into it, going, whoa.
Yeah.
What's that about? That's really interesting that I just responded without judgment. I think how interesting basically removes criticism and judgment from the equation, and you get curious. So how interesting, like that was really intense right then. And I have no idea where that came from.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Well, I call that being an emotional adult.
Yes.
And you know what else though? I think another word that's coming to me is empathy. Empathy for yourself and for other people, because
Right.
it's the curiosity piece, and is like, isn't that interesting? But you have compassion so much for like why you got triggered, and that like the little emotional tantrums, like the child who doesn't have the emotional capacity to know why they're feeling this way throws a temper tantrum.
Totally.
We as adults still do that all the time.
Yeah.
But there's an emotional adultness that needs to be cultivated and grown in us. And I think we're realizing that it affects every area of our lives.
Yeah. Because otherwise it feels out of control.
It is,
and
yeah.
that doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Like if you think about without the ability to self-regulate,
Yeah.
and you go back to Real Housewives and it's just like this constant exploding, that doesn't feel safe. Not only
No.
for yourself, surely, but also for those around you. It's kind of like you're walking around on eggshells. You never know what's going to set somebody off. And that is obviously not an enjoyable relationship to have, nor is that an emotional relationship that's enjoyable with yourself, because
No.
you can't trust yourself. It's just sort of like, I don't know when I'm going to erupt the next
Exactly.
time.
You trust. And I think this is why it's becoming such a huge conversation, even like the corporate world and like business worlds, because people are realizing, look, you can be super successful, but if you are not an emotional adult and you can't handle certain things, like it's going to affect how you are like even being successful or doing relationships in the
Oh,
world.
I mean, the amount of drama that
Yeah.
happens in the work environment,
Yeah.
and so much energy is spent around, well, she said this or he said this, or can you believe that happened? Can you believe they said that or did that? You know, you think about these environments that probably everybody is around unless you work from home. I mean, if you're around people and there's not a lot of emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, it's going to be like high school all over again.
And you'll take people's hook and get triggered by them and get caught up in their drama all the time. This is why we love this phrase. I learned this in recovery. It's not my circus, not my monkeys.
Yes.
It's like once you start realizing, because even that is an emotional maturity too.
Mhm.
It's like you don't get hooked by people.
Well, I think one of the things that an old friend of mine said to me once, it's like the most simple thing. And also I still remember it and I'm going to say it today. Everyone has a great reason for doing what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes into the empathy conversation. But once you recognize that the way people respond, the way people react says so much about them and less about you. And when you are able to get that on a deep level, like I remember my sister Megan, she'd always say that. She's like, nobody's thinking about you as much as you're thinking about you. You know, nobody cares as much as you care about you.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing. It's like, it's never about you. People's responses, people's outbursts, people's anger, all of that is about them.
Oh, it's so hard.
And when you have the ability to say, this is not about me, not my circus, not my monkeys, but what in their response is making me feel insecure or triggered or angry or sad or hurt or whatever, having that moment to analyze what is getting stirred up in me and how can I respond in a way that is healthy. And that takes practice. And it really comes back to the pause before the impulse to react, the pause before we respond, and just checking in, going, oop, that's triggering me. Oop, that's making me feel like I want to lash out. I want to be defensive. I want to, protect myself. Having that moment of pause and checking in. And I'll talk about how to do all of that in the last episode. But I think that's a big piece of the puzzle, is sort of just slowing down the process.
Yeah. And that takes practice. Like you're saying, it's like cultivating a muscle. And it's emotional maturity, and yet we were never really taught how to mature. We just all thought if you became an adult, it just came with the territory.
Right. God, isn't that the truth? I really think that that's the case for money.
I know.
That's the case for sex. That's the case for relationships.
Yeah.
And then emotional maturity. It's like, you're just supposed to like wake up and know how to do your taxes and have great sex for the rest of your life. And nobody's going to teach you about it. You just better figure it out.
I know
already.
And it usually takes a breakdown in a relationship.
Yes.
To actually start learning how to handle not only your own emotions and articulate those, but how to handle other people's. And so thank God for therapy.
I was going to say, like, the biggest tool of self-awareness, therapy, coaching, workshops, journaling. I mean, these are some of those ways that you can become more self-aware and more curious about what you're feeling, and asking yourself those important questions of, if I gave myself permission to feel, what am I feeling?
The other thing too, I just thought about that you and I do a whole lot. It's just asking other people, how do you handle it when you feel depressed? Or how do you handle it when you're feeling really raged and get triggered? Sometimes even just getting that mirroring, and asking for other people's process. I mean, gosh, I feel so blessed that we have the same vocabulary of being able to, and having that ability to articulate that with somebody that's in your life. Because, especially when you're trying to develop this part of this yourself, you really do need other people that are in that journey too.
Totally.
And that's why I just love community, support groups, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, a safe space to communicate, talk about feelings, work on that self-awareness piece, being a mirror, like you said. I think that is so powerful, and it just makes the process go quicker. I think when you've got other people doing it alongside of you. God, I mean, this is such a great conversation around giving yourself permission to feel, and then doing it in a way that allows you to not be an adolescent, to not be indulgent, to not be reactive, to not be impulsive, but putting some space in between that sort of like animal brain and dropping into our higher self and coming at it with more maturity and realizing that our work is with us. Our work is with trying better to understand how we tick, what makes us feel triggered, why we respond the way that we do, so that we can continue to become better at that, healthier at that, more mature in that. It just makes for a more pleasant experience of life.
And that there's such huge value in doing that. And like, we know that, but like, to really cultivate this, it makes you more successful.
Yeah.
It makes you have better self-confidence. You have better relationships. Like, your life actually gets better when you really learn to develop the emotional maturity of who you are.
Well, you have some control over it.
Yeah.
Versus feeling out of control.
Yeah, you're not living in reactive mode.
It's really nice. I mean, it's definitely work. To cultivate this, it takes time and practice, but it is a lot more freeing.
I sure wish they'd teach this in schools instead of like even all the, how to be really smart in math or how to be better, writer. It's like a whole class dedicated how to handle your emotions.
I mean, truly. So we're going to get into that. That's a perfect place to pause.
Yeah.
And just know that the how-to is coming in the final episode.
Yeah.
But my encouragement to everybody who is listening is to take out your journal. Whether it's now, whether it's this evening, and just start with those little journal prompts of, if I gave myself permission to admit it, I feel sad that, I feel angry that, I feel hopeful that, I feel excited for, filling in some of these blanks to just begin to connect with dropping into how you feel, having more self-awareness to it. And then next week, I'm so excited because we have an expert coming on the show to talk about emotional intelligence and what that looks like as a concept, as a philosophy, as something that is studied and researched and taught in a way that our sweet little selves can't talk about it. So we got to bring in an expert. So make sure to tune in to that episode. And until then, remember that the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. We will chat with y'all next week. Bye. Hey y'all, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some amazing nuggets to take home and start implementing into your life. And if you're looking for the show notes and links, head on over to maryhyatt.com/show. And if you loved it, why not bring your girlfriends along this journey of becoming fully alive with you? Just give a quick share of this episode to your social channels and enjoy those debriefing convos with your besties. Thanks again, and I can't wait to connect with you next week.